Welcome to Card Payments in a Nutshell webinar, Part 4, Frauds and Risk Management. In this webinar, I am going to discuss what kind of frauds are visible today, what are the most popular frauds, and what is the fraud evolution in terms of the geography, in terms of the type of frauds. Then I am going to discuss the new security challenges related to the digital economy and the digitalization of our life. Then at the end, we will discuss together risk management and liabilities of different players in the payment systems. Let's start with a discussion about typical frauds visible today on the market. Cards are very prone to frauds in online environment and in the pre-EMV territories, which means if I go with EMV card to the ATM and the ATM does not support EMV, then I am forced to use my magstripe interface. And this causes the chance for fraudsters to make a fraud and to copy my card and take money or use copied card at such ATM. So, the first, I will discuss frauds from the perspective of customer, cardholder, and I will discuss from the perspective of merchants. What kind of frauds are most painful for those two players? In the case of customer, it's about the card interception or card copying. Card interception means that the card could be taken, the new card could be taken from the regular mail when the bank or issuer sends the card to the cardholder. Somebody with bad intentions could take a card and could try to use this card for fraudulent transactions. In the past, the PIN number used to be sent by another email and it was easier. Today, the PIN initialization goes through the electronic banking. It is not easy to use such card. But anyhow, after 3D secure introduction, fraudsters identified the vulnerability in the whole process and started fraudulent transaction, classified later as a 3D secure fraud. Then, of course, we have a lot of stolen cards, cards stolen from our pockets or lost pockets, could be even in restaurants, which is quite popular. Especially danger if somebody writes the PIN to the card on card itself. Then, copying the card. Copying the card is not so easy in the case of EMV and contactless, but it's quite easy in terms of internet and magstripe cards. In the past, popular in restaurants, hotels, taxis. Probably we all experienced the situation when the merchant or taxi driver keeps the terminal in such a way that the cardholder, passenger or consumer cannot monitor the card full-time, permanently. It means that we open the door for some fraudulent behavior and we don't know how our card is used. So copying the card, intercepting the cards are considered as one of the most danger and unpleasant frauds from the perspective of customers. Then, some frauds are related to the transactions, shopping transactions. They are called transactional fraud. They are related to sellers' dishonesty or spoofing. Delivery. Customer purchases something on internet, some goods on internet, and those goods are paid by card, and those goods never come to it, or the seller is shipping different product, or is shipping the product with the low quality. The low quality is easy to claim in the case of tourism and transportation. I already mentioned we pay for vacation, we go to vacation and we claim that the quality of breakfast or quality of hotel was much lower than presented in the offer. Then it could happen that our account, card account, is charged. It could be charged more than expected. For example, book costs 50 euro and the seller charges 60 euro due to some reasons unexpected by us. Or our account is charged for the order we never placed, somebody else placed that order. Or It's about the late payment return, which means I try to order some goods on internet, and the internet shop accepts my order, accepts my payment, and I am waiting for the goods. And after the certain time, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they say, oh, I'm sorry, we cannot ship the goods, we will return your money. Which means they are getting the free of charge credit for 2-3 weeks and can use my money to perform some financial operations and get a profit from that. Next group of frauds against customers are related to the stealing the digital identity. We all have more and more accounts. Email accounts, bank accounts, card accounts, digital wallets, and stuff like that. And all fraudsters are looking how to get access to the credentials, how to get access to our accounts. And they use various techniques. And once they have access to our account, if this bank account, they can perform many operations, money transfer, they could withdraw the money, they could, if this is another account, they could learn about the card data, which is very often associated or registered to our account in the, for example, a certain internet shop. Fraudsters use a lot of techniques like phishing, farming, installing the malware on smartphones or PCs, but fraudsters are also more desperate and attacking the ID databases kept in the retailer premises or in the even bank premises. Of course, man in the middle is very often the crucial success factor to find somebody inside the institution who agrees to behave unloyal to the institution and join the fraudsters and give them the information which is very useful to break the security means. Now let's go to merchant perspective and the frauds which could be classified as criminal. This is about account login frauds, where fraudsters use stolen or compromised credentials to log in into the user account and perform some payments and get access to some goods. It could be about creating the synthetic or new account using the synthetic identities, and that way fraudsters try to get access to credit or access to the account and some decision on our accounts. The payments frauds, when fraudsters use stolen credentials to perform money transfer between accounts or money transfer to some no-name, to the prepaid card and stuff like that, where it could be converted to the cash very quickly or converted to some cryptocurrencies very quickly. Clean frauds. Clean fraud is the situation when criminals analyzes and learns a lot about the fraud detection system and learns a lot about the particular victim or target victim. And then when it comes to the transaction, the fraudster is capable to act in such a way that either the fraud detection system cannot identify it's a fraud, or in the way he is cheating as a different person. And there are also some more sophisticated fraud schemes like call tax scam, when fraudsters are using the stolen credit card, goods are shipped to the true address, and of course the owner of the card is absolutely not aware, and fraudsters are coming to the owner, and the owner of the card is even surprised that somebody sends some goods to him, and fraudsters are coming and behaving like, saying they are behaving on the behalf of like representatives of the retailer, and try to take those goods back. Then we have a lot of frauds which could be classified as dishonesty. Return frauds, more very popular wardrobing or renting, where people are taking goods, use the goods one time and try to return the goods. And it's not so popular in Central Eastern Europe, but it's extremely popular in Western and especially US. And retailers are looking to find protection against that. Cross-retailer return, when the same product has different prices and fraudsters go to the shop with the lower price, buy the product, go to the shop with the higher price, present the synthetic artificial slip or fiscal receipt, and ask to return. So they get more money than they paid for the product originally. Reshipping. Reshipping is a fraud where somebody pays for the goods and goods are delivered to the person, to the shopper, and shopper claims that he never received the goods. So the shop, the internet shop, sends the goods again. As the result, shop sells 2 items, 2 products at the price of a single one. The next kind of fraud is a friendly fraud called also chargeback fraud. The shopper pays for goods and receives the goods and then goes to the shop saying, oh, goods has been never delivered, and the shopper changes the mind and requests for sending back, for giving him back the money. Of course, it's somehow possible to make a protection. It's legal, but it is dishonesty, of course, and used mostly for gambling and adult services. As the result, the shopper gets the product and the seller, the retailer, loses the product and has no revenue. And also it could be about the late payment to the merchant. If merchant issues the invoice, sends the goods, and the shopper pays the invoice, kind of shopper who is accepting the invoice, pays the invoice very late. So the shopper gets just a free of charge credit. Another group of frauds affecting merchants are frauds related to affiliate program, multi-partner affiliate program, where one of the partners try to behave in the unfair way and get the stronger position thanks to that. It could be about creating the synthetic account and use the synthetic account and the fully automated process to generate the movement and the actions in the system and then increase own statistics. Then it could be about getting the real people who are logging into merchant sites using the fake accounts and also generate the traffic. And it could be also about the over-frequency usage of the system. I personally met 2 cases. One are employees of the petrol station who are keeping the loyalty card of that petrol station, and if customer pays for the petrol and gives no loyalty card, then those employees are using their own loyalty cards. It's quite easy to identify for the petrol company that the certain card is used for many operations, but in fact it happens. Another I met, there was a lady waiting in the Carrefour supermarket asking people to use her card to present her loyalty card when they are purchasing some goods, and she was targeting people having the full basket with the payment amount above 100 Polish zloty, which is more or less 25 euro. So this kind of frauds affecting merchants from different parties of the system are also visible on the market. Now let's discuss about the evolution of the fraud. The fraud is not equal fraud, the fraud is not stable, the fraud is changing. That's why fraudsters are looking for the new fraud models. Either they are looking for some gaps in security, or they are looking to the new technologies, to the new payment methods, and try to find the new fraud scenarios. The table shows who was identified of the fraudsters. At the beginning, in 80s, there were individuals. Today, we have the organized, well-organized global crime rings with decentralized organization. At the beginning, we were saying that consumers are affected, or small retailers are affected, or single participant of the system. Today, all participants, all industries affected. This is the cost of claim processing and credibility of participants of the system. What kind of frauds? More and more frauds related to digital economy, digital universe. And what type of cards are targeted for frauds? In the past, it was quite easy to indicate a single type of cards. Today, all card products are a subject of attacking, including the digital wallet keeping the cards. So it is the evolution, and we should expect the new picture of the card frauds, new behavior of the fraudsters, as following the new economy rules, following the popularization of Internet of Things and stuff like that. Fraud in different countries is not equal. I'm showing a selection of a few countries from Central Eastern Europe, and we can easily see the percentage of fraudulent transactions made in card not present, on ATMs and on POS devices. If we look at Romania, 60% of all fraudulent transactions are coming from POS devices. If we look at Estonia, 16% are coming on POS. It's almost the same. But the split between card not present and ATM is completely different. In Romania, card not present, internet-related frauds dominate by something like 5-6 times. And in Estonia, it's equal split, more or less equal split, with a dominance of ATM frauds. So when we look at frauds, we must consider the time evolution, and we must consider the geographical differences in the fraud. So this was about how frauds look today and what we can observe around us. Now I am going to the second section, and this section will be about the new security challenges, which are coming with the new trends in the commerce. Let's discuss it step by step. First of all, digitalization of identities. We are losing more and more accounts. We are storing more and more personal information in online accounts. Protection of personal and sensitive data varies considerably between countries, and customers are more and more open for buying cross-border and storing and leaving their personal data in different countries. If the protection in different countries is lower than in our original domestic country, it is causing the fraudsters to develop the new fraud models. Cross-border cyber criminals are in action. Then the next component, or the next trend, very strong, is a mobility. We are going mobile. Protection of mobile device is much weaker than protection of traditional PCs. This is due to some historical reasons, and this is because people don't take care about that too much. People are not aware, awareness is very low. So that's the fact that the mobile malware in smartphones is growing by 200% year to year, measured as CAGR. Second reason is that mobile brings the specific behavior. We do not type many characters. We do most of actions by using the one finger, pressing the one button, and we expect that the device will do everything on behalf as a result of such action. And the characters and the buttons are very often very small, and it's easy to make a mistake during reading or pressing not a proper button, which creates, this situation creates the place and the space for fraudsters to install the malware and try to catch or intercept our digital identity. Of course, we can lose mobile devices, which is causing the same problems like losing the wallet or losing the cards. Internationalization of the commerce. When we do business locally within one economical and tax system, it's much easier to avoid frauds, comparing to the situation when we go to cross-border and use the international marketplaces. In that case, the risk of fraud is 40% higher. When we use the international marketplaces, the risk of fraud is 40% higher. Fraudsters are carefully reading the local taxation rules and are trying to find local delivery rules, returns, chargebacks, and are developing the new fraud schemes. Implementing of security measures by merchant. That's the big problem. That's the big problem. merchants are very often concerned about the conversion rate. If they implement high security protection, then they usually are losing on the revenue. I will discuss it a few slides later. And they try to avoid and that way they are keeping the open doors for fraudsters who are approaching them and who are eager to steal the data. The next reason are IT systems. Usually the infrastructure on the merchant side, not only on the merchant, is composed from the old systems and the new systems. And the old system have weaker protection and the new systems have better protection, usually. And both kind of systems and different versions of different systems work together. There must be a place, there must be a gap in security. This is the question of when hackers find it. That's the reason, and having no IT system or having a homogeneous IT system is not possible today. The different providers provide different components. And even if we look how PCI DSS changed the frauds, even if we look at companies who are PCI DSS certified, which means they respect the rules and they apply and use the rules, such companies are also vulnerable to frauds. The risk is lower, but there is still a risk. So even if we apply the certain good practices or standards, it doesn't mean that we are protected. It means that we are reducing the risk only. The next important trend in IT system is a cloud computing. In the cloud computing, we have a separation between the responsibility for the data breach and the accountability for the data breach. Usually, if data breach happens in the cloud system, it's on the mass scale, it's impacting the company, reputation of the company, finances of the company, but also impacting big amount of potential customers. That is important. Specialists are aware about that, are working on solution, but the risk is growing because this style of computing is also becoming more and more popular. QR codes and beacons. QR codes and beacons are part of geolocation. And those passive devices bring information about products, but also could bring information about the web pages. Fraudsters, of course, immediately realized its possibility to make some frauds using the QR code or overlays on the QR code labels, or stalling the beacons, or redirecting the beacon users to different fraudulent web pages. That happens, and the risk is growing, and the number of frauds related with that is growing. And the last thing I want to discuss is the Internet of Things. The number of devices connected to Internet, autonomous somehow devices, is growing with the dynamic 15% CAGR. And still 70% of all units, old units and the new units, do not communicate with encryption. They do not use the encryption for communication. It means that payments in Internet of Things are happening without attendance. If the payments are happening without attendance and the fraudsters make any fraud, the question is how to identify those frauds. If we have the automatic machines, fraud identification systems, then fraud identification systems are prepared to identify known frauds. How to identify the new frauds if the machines are discussing with machines and there are no human beings monitoring that? That's the big challenge, and we must resolve that challenge. Okay, we went through the typical frauds, we went through the new challenges. Now let's discuss how to manage the risk, how to moderate it, and discuss who is liable in the case the fraud happens. First of all, what risk management is about. Somebody could say we must make and maintain as secure system as possible, but it's not true. The fraud management is to find the balance between the financials, revenue, operational costs, profits, and the security. And to find such balance is not easy. Let's look at the table. If we have a transaction made with the good intention, or transaction made as a fraudulent transaction, then such kind of two transactions are going through the risk assessment system and fraud identification system. And then fraud identification system can say it's a negative transaction and reject, or can say it's positive transaction and accept. If the transaction is genuine and is classified as positive, then this situation is very good for us. We are getting the true revenue. No risk, no additional costs. If we have the fraudulent transaction and the fraud identification system identifies it as fraudulent transaction, that's good for us because we are avoiding costs related to the fraud. If there is a fraudulent transaction classified wrongly as a positive transaction, then we are exposed, we are a victim of a fraud. This means cost for everybody. And what we want to do, we want to minimize the number of such transactions. And the fourth case is if the transaction is genuine and is classified as negative. What happens? We are losing customers. We are losing not only the revenue, but also the reputation. And the risk management is about finding the proper balance between the technology, between the security means, between the finance, between the revenue and operational costs. Let's have a look how it is organized by participations of the payment processing and issuers, acquirers, retailers and other. First of all, I would like to express and underline that fraud follows opportunity and attacks weaknesses. And we must know where we are vulnerable and how to take control over the weaknesses, potential gaps, potential places where we can be attacked. To be successful, it must be organized as a continuous process in the company. First of all, we must diagnose our situation and identify the risks we are exposed to. Then after that, we should, following the identified risks, we must detect the gaps in our fraud prevention systems, in our IT system as well. Then when gaps are identified and detected, we must recommend how to develop the mitigation solutions, mitigation procedures, and what tools should be used to mitigate. Then we must perform a test if our proposal of the mitigation solutions is working, is really reducing the fraud. After that, if we say yes, it helps, we must implement our solution. So we went through the process of diagnostic, identification, testing, proposing testing, and implementing the fraud prevention. What happens now? We must monitor continuously what happened, how it works, if it works as expected or different. And as a consequence, again, we must look for the new fraud types, new fraud reports, recommendation, and diagnose our organization and repeat the circle. This is the risk management process in the very simple way and the very simple outline. It more or less works similar scenario in all organizations. Of course, there are a lot of details. We are providing specialized webinar on the risk management process. Please go to this webinar and learn details about how risk management should be organized in issuer, in acquire, and in the retailer environment. And the last slide I want to discuss is about the liability. If fraud happens, it's not a risk, it's a fraud. If fraud happens, who is liable for that? Who takes responsibility, financial and other responsibility for that? Let's discuss about the card holder and the situation when the card holder uses the card in the carelessly way. For example, card holder puts a PIN number on the card. That's the reason if it happens and if the card is stolen and used, then the card holder is responsible for such kind of fraud. If the card is properly managed and traded and is stolen or is lost, then the card holder must immediately report that fact to the issuer, and issuer is blocking all future transactions on the card. but cardholder responsibility is limited to €150. This is the valid for Poland and majority of countries within European Union. Above that amount, the issuer takes responsibility. Can merchant be responsible for frauds? Yes. Internet merchants know that they are responsible for frauds caused in the case when the card payment is performed without 3D secure process. Then if fraud happens, then merchant is responsible for such kind of frauds. But if it is 3D secure, then the responsibility is on the side of the card issuer. Brick and mortar merchants have a lot of recommendations how to use terminals, what should be the configuration and equipment of the terminal. For example, during the EMV introduction, there was a liability shift from the card issuer to the merchants who are not accepting cards, EMV cards. If the cardholder brings EMV cards with the magstripe interface and merchant accepts only magstripe interface and fraud happens, then merchant is responsible for that. Opposite to that, if cardholder comes with EMV card with the magstripe interface and merchant supports EMV, then in the case of fraud, the issuer is responsible for the fraud, not merchant. So it could be also the situation where cardholder is responsible, merchant is responsible. Can issuer be responsible? Yes, if the issuer gives authorization in the card present situation. The card is used in the fraudulent way and issuer says, yes, I authorize this transaction. Then the issuer could be also responsible for that. Can acquirer be responsible for the fraudulent transactions? Yes. Acquirer is responsible if payment is made by card and the product or service is not delivered to the merchant's bankruptcy, for example, travel agency. So all participants could be responsible depending on the situation, depending on the condition. The key is to respect the security rules and security routines. And the liability and responsibility is described quite precisely in the regulations issued by card organization and supported by the local government, by the regulation issued by the local governments. Please let me summarize what we discussed in that webinar. We made a review of typical frauds. We went through the fraud evolution trends in the times, in the geography. Then we discussed new security challenges related to the digital economy, new technologies, and the new technology revolution. And at the end, we discussed also methods of risk management and the question of liabilities. All those topics are important. This is the big part of the knowledge, and the fraud management for the merchant, fraud management for issuer, fraud management for acquirers are subjects or separate webinars. Please contact our portal and we will discuss how to provide such webinars. This is the end of the webinar. Thank you for listening.